This is the Ecommerce Braintrust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Braintrust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Braintrust podcast. I'm Julie Spear, Head of Retail Marketplace Services at Acadia. And today I'm joined by Tyler Dixon, E-commerce Manager at Reduce. We'll be discussing the path that led him to overseeing e-com for an industry-leading water bottle company, how he approaches evaluating a 2P versus 3P selling model, and where he sees the industry headed in the years to come. So with that, welcome to the podcast, Tyler. It's great to have you.
Hey, Julie. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and dig right in. I find it interesting in talking to a lot of e-com people that there's no one path that leads to e-com leadership, given how rapidly things in the industry change. So I'm wondering if you could just start out by walking me through the handful of stops that you had prior to your time leading e-com at Reduce. I saw you have a background in sales and account management at a large CPG brand, as well as time spent as an analyst earlier in your career at Groupon. What are the key things that you learned in those previous experiences that you feel help prepare you for your current position?
Sure. Yeah. So very broad, right? I studied finance in school, retail tech, and then worked for a very conservative CPG manufacturer. So looking back, it was the quirky tech business where we thought really big about the lens of e-commerce and how we can shape it. And while it wasn't a traditional retailer in the sense, like we were in the trenches back of 2014 to 2018 of real cutting edge digital marketing and all that stuff. It's changed a lot, but it's been very valuable. I ended up totally flipping the script from Groupon, as you mentioned, going to a 100-year-old cleaning products company. I felt that when I got there, I brought value to the organization, bringing some more creative ideas to a business, that had been around 100 plus years. When I got there, I went in and I immediately started supporting the Amazon business in terms of forecasting for 1P, 3P, and multi-pack wholesale partners. And then from there, I jumped into the typical CPG sales route where I was managing more traditional brick and mortar sales, hardware, military, regional dollar, grocery. I think that taught me a lot of discipline and supply chain sourcing, manufacturing, and then obviously driving customer and retailer sales. From there, I really thought about what was next. And I noticed that in this lens of e-commerce now, you really have creatives and then you have your typical sales-led organizations. And I thought I was in a unique position having a broad background covering both of those. And there's a lot of maybe friction points or questions in unknown territory when you work to manage those teams. So having someone that had experience navigating and working for leaders on both ends of the spectrum, I thought I could provide value to our organization.
Very nice. Yeah, I think having the varied experience when you're talking about sales, you're talking about supply chain, touching all of that. When you go broadly into leading e-commerce at a brand, that's all in your purview. So having that broad base of experience definitely makes sense in teeing you up for the position where you are now. As someone who's seen CPG brands develop, how do you view yourself and your more cross-functional role, how it relates to the sales, marketing, brand teams at Reduce? I'm curious how this is fundamentally different from when you worked in more pure sales and account management capacity in the past.
Yeah. So as mentioned, it's really been about connecting cross-functional teams for me. That's something that I've enjoyed. I like to learn about the different areas of the business. And then when we all connect together, we can make the best ideas. Just inquisitive of the functions outside of my scope. I think that's helped build trust, communication amongst the peers and allow us to really work together. In regards to your follow-up and second question there, it's totally different. When you're working with brick and mortar retailer partners, there's so many guardrails to the way business is done, right? And that's for better or worse, but there's rules to the game, right? When you're working with those accounts, you can get away for the most part in working in silos, right? You stick to your channel, you're the expert there, et cetera. With e-commerce, I think that our cross-functional teams and cross-functional teams should be excited with e-commerce when you lift those guardrails. You can rethink your processes, become more efficient, and more importantly, bring products that may have had blockers to entering the market to the market. And I think that's super exciting and something that teams can rally behind.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. We often talk about just from a content standpoint and conversations we have with brands about the need to reduce the silos as much as possible to get the most possible out of your e-commerce play on retail channels. So I couldn't agree with you more on that point. Looking specifically at Reduce, you're in a really competitive category. So how do you position the brand so that it stays differentiated from others in the space?
Yeah, I think arguably we could call us the most competitive category for maybe the last 18 months. It's a challenge, but it's palpable. And I think to pat the team on the back, a lot of it is because of what the brand Reduce has accomplished in the time before I got here. I think that our teams have remained persistent on creating products that are useful for everyday real life and we're relatable. The hydration shopper, hydration is a necessity of life. Water. It's not defined by one or many segments. It's really all of us, from kids to adults. And based on who you are, where you live, you shop various channels and platforms. So I think for us, it's really kudos, and it comes down to the amazing retail partnerships that we've built here over the last 10 years that has allowed many customers to experience and trust our brand. So differentiation for us doesn't really require a complex strategy session, because anything that hits the shelves or lands on the product page, really it was designed and brought to life because it was relatable, attainable, and we used an efficient design to get it there.
Yeah. And kind of talking a little bit more about selling models and everything in the path that you've gone with Reduce, one of the key strategic priorities from the time that you joined Reduce was moving from a reseller or Amazon 2P model to an Amazon 3P model, where you sell the brand directly on Amazon as a third-party seller. This is a topic that I love. And as an agency, we have a strong perspective on which of these models is generally better for brands. But you came into Reduce looking to understand what's best for the business and implement a selling model that objectively maximized the performance on Amazon. So I'm wondering if you can start from that perspective and walk us through how you developed the strategy, how you handed a brand's e-com strand, you were handed it, and then you assessed the selling model that was most advantageous. What were the key factors that you were looking at during your assessment to make the decision moving from a 2P to a 3P?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a question that a lot of brands are looking at. And for the leaders or team leads that are listening, asking themselves this very question that you asked, let's quickly just comment, and I'm sure it's been said before on here too, but there's no blanket solution for any brand or business on the best way to do business with Amazon. And for that matter, it's going to continue to evolve and change based on where your brand's at, where your brand's heading, and countless external factors, whether it be from Amazon or supply chains, et cetera. I think we could talk for days on the key areas that you need to look at, but at a very, very high level, I think you need to ask yourself, as of right now, what's working well, what isn't, what will be crucial for your success next year, in 3 years, or what's needed for an exit. Look at the brands inside your category and outside of your category. What is advantageous for them, or what is a disadvantage for them that they have versus their competitors right now based on their fulfillment model. Based on your answers, ask yourself and research if moving to or away from, whether it be a reseller, 3P or 1P, are those going to remove the obstacles and help you achieve your goals? Based on your answers, ask or research if truly moving away or moving to a reseller 3P model or 1P model, are they going to remove the obstacles and help you achieve your goals or not? I know that the answers to your question that I'm providing here feel maybe far from the surface, but they're truly questions you need to start with and ask yourself. For an example, let's say you're responsible for your e-commerce business and you've gone through your homework. And for example, you believe that you'll provide a better experience or more value to the shopper by going 3P. That's great. But understand that this overhaul will impact all of the verticals and all the cross-functional roles of your business, and understand how the change in operations, finance, especially cash flows, marketing, your own team headcount. Make sure your team fully understands the world that you're moving into and that you have their support when you have to navigate some of these challenges.
Yeah, I found that in the conversations that I've had with brands on this topic, we can look at it from an e-com retail perspective and think, okay, flexibility with catalog assortment, brand positioning, all of the clear points are within our direct purview when we're looking at a retail.com view pop to mind. One of the biggest things that becomes a hurdle for brands to evaluate and really sort through is the financial, the cash flow perspective. That it's often like the finance team within the brand that has the most difficult time with the adjustment and selling models. I just really wanted to put a underscore and bold that point because I have found that that's one of the biggest hurdles to address.
Absolutely. It could be make it or break it, right? Go through the work. If you don't have a seat at the leadership table and you're in charge of running this business, make sure that you are covered up and you either get that seat or you have someone to represent you. I mean, you really need all of the leadership functions on board with what's about to happen.
Can you walk me through that a little bit around how you had those functions come together and make sure everyone was on board with the move? How did you take into account the considerations that kind of fall out of your direct purview within ecom? How did you bring all the decision makers to the table and have them kind of come on board with this change in selling model?
When I say this can take a while, like it can take a while, like more than a year, right? If that's what it takes. So having these like forefront conversations and asking yourself, like, what do we need to do to elevate this brand even further from where we're at? Like, where is the opportunity? These small conversations, they're important conversations, but they may sound tedious. Like, discuss all of this stuff at the very high level. I think we were able to speak with leadership team directly and get total buy-in on, hey, this is why we need to go this route. And it's not going to be an overnight transition. And we're going to set up time and make sure that everyone's aligned on the intricacies and what could happen down the line. And like, please, if there's any pushback or we have any sort of doubt as to whether we can get this done from a bandwidth or an org perspective, like, let's address those and take the time needed to go through this transition correctly. So I think it was all about framing and making sure that everyone was bought in beforehand.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that, now that you're a year in or a little bit more than a year into your time at Reduce, are there any key learnings from your time and from this transition, from the initiative of moving from 2P to 3P that you'd recommend to someone considering a similar decision? Anything that stands out in particular?
Yeah, I think just don't rush the process. Like, hopefully you're making a decision based on near and long-term success. Ensure that you have the functional leadership support from the top down. If you're making the change from a reseller to a 3P, as a brand, you're going to be entering territories for your cross-functional teams that they're learning for the first time. I think people, as cliche as it sounds, like people make a huge difference. For instance, like the reseller agency, we worked with them for 7 years before we went 3P, and they had outstanding people. They did things that I knew that we could not cover in the terms of just day-to-day operations, etc. We spent way more months interviewing, getting to know prospective agencies than I thought we would probably have to. But it was important to not only find capable talent, but talent that understood our mission and would be able to connect and work together with our internal teams. I think that was a big evaluating factor. So just take your time planning the transition and find the right people that will help get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, I think in an industry that moves at lightning speed with change, the advice to actually allow time for consideration and to evaluate your steps, I think that that is something that it's very sound advice. And those are words that more of us need to hear more often to be very mindful and thoughtful in the process. Well, let's kind of move to a different direction through a different lens for our last question here, or my last question. We talked a lot about the past and your experience that brought you to overseeing ecom at Reduce so far, but looking to the future, is there anything particularly interesting in terms of how the industry is developing that you're paying attention to or you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no shortage of developments right now. I think when you define the industry as basically our category, we're seeing basically a change from, hey, this is a hydration tool to, hey, this could be a fashion product as well. So I think that's a trend that we don't see slowing down. I think it's great for us because it allows us to really create tailored products for our consumers. So that's something we're excited about. When you look at the industry in terms of Amazon, e-commerce, et cetera, I think the supply chains are super interesting right now. We're paying attention to the various fulfillment programs that Amazon's launched, whether it be AWD or the next thing that could come out in the next few months. I think it'll be really interesting to see how the non-branded space shakes out after Amazon launches their platform that will look a lot like Temu. I think that probably a lot of us agree that convenience and shipping speed is still what makes Amazon a trusted marketplace for the US consumer. So I'm not sure how exactly this one plays out, but I think it's clear if you're a vendor or you're a brand, your brand equity and how you're differentiating yourself on Amazon and your other retail partnerships and distribution methods is more important than probably ever before.
I've always followed a rule of thumb, being in this space now for nearly a decade, of Amazon gives us the cues of what to pay attention to and what to invest in from a marketing standpoint and how to position your brand by the features and functionality that they roll out and where they seem to be focusing their energy. There is so much that is available now to brands on how to position themselves and differentiate their brand through organic positioning. It's not just about advertising. There is so much more that Amazon has rolled out and will be continuing to roll out to brands. I think the point of focusing on your brand equity and how to differentiate yourself on Amazon as well as other channels is a real important one. And I agree. That's an area that I'm excited to pay attention to as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. We'll have to see what happens here. It'll be interesting.
Well, that could be a whole follow-up episode. So I'll have to see if you'd be willing to come back on to talk that through. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your time and sharing all the learnings that you've had from your time at Reduce, as well as the transition from a 2P to a 3P model. The point there, it takes time. Do your homework and really understand the needs and goals of your brand and see which model makes the most sense for you and get the rest of your team on board. So thank you for your time today, Tyler. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.